that it was confronting to a young veterinarian who arrived back here in 1964 that a name Gilruth, revered in the veterinary profession, was treated with contempt and disdain, and mostly, as I realised much later, by people who knew little of the whole story, but had picked up on the vibe. History was all around the scene then: long pickets on the beaches, a bomb-damaged military building in Bennett Street that I wished I could get permission to live in, an army ambulance left in the bush out by Lee Point Road, the door open as if 20 years earlier someone had said, "The war's over, mate," and he got out of the truck and joined the party. Several government departments worked out of the wartime naval buildings behind the old town hall, then motor vehicle registry. And I started my veterinary practice there in an 8-foot square room within the animal industries branch. Actually, not far across there from where we are now. All this evidence of World War II and the rawness of Darwin brought about a latent interest in history, previously shunned as I pursued science and thought history not of interest. Years later, when I embarked on the bachelor's story, of course, Gilruth was involved, as it was his interest in the development of the Northern Territory via the farms, and Bachelor Farm was important. And that's what brought him here. That was his great interest. The Gilruth Prize in Veterinary Science was established in 1953 and is awarded annually to a person who has contributed significantly and scientifically within the profession and for the greater good, just as Gilruth did, and as I leave you to discover when you read this book. Names that were revered when I was at university, such as Henry, Stewart, Ball and Cluny's Ross, may possibly mean nothing to you. And you may well ask, what difference would it make to me? However, the people awarded have had an impact on your lives, as their achievements have benefited the Australian economy and ultimately you. For instance, William Webster persuaded the Queensland Government to develop tuberculin testing of cattle, so eliminating tuberculosis from the household milk supplies. The swift closing down of anthrax infections, which easily transposes to humans. Effective control of swine fever in pigs and diseases of chickens and bees. But listen to a greater story. As the first chief of the Division of Animal Health within the Council for Scientific Research, which we now call CSIRO, Gilruth summoned his knowledge of livestock conditions and utilised his recognised ability to select the right person for the job. In late 1931, he asked vet Arthur Turner, who had recently developed a vaccine for black disease in sheep, think tetanus family, to go to Townsville Laboratory and work on contagious bovine pleuropneumonia, one of the 3 great cattle plagues of history. The disease came into Melbourne in 1858 and had an immediate and devastating effect on cattle herds as it spread rapidly across the mainland states, reaching the great herds in the north here in 1864. Overseas scientists had tried for control, but it was Arthur Turner who first showed that an organism was a bacteria, not a virus as they had thought, and subsequently he developed an effective vaccine and then a test for the disease. This enabled infected cattle to be detected and immediately removed from the herd. The disease cleared in the south, but up here it still raged across about 5 million square kilometres, subsequently affecting the supply of cattle to travel south for fattening. A name some of you will recognise, Lionel Rose, Chief Veterinary Officer of the Northern Territory, then utilised his military experience to set up a program and provided a protected area of 3,200 square kilometres centred around Alice Springs and down into South Australia. Cattle were taken to Alice Springs, tested, kept separate and transported on different trains to South Australia, where suspect cattle were slaughtered. healthy cattle were vaccinated and sold. Then, development of mobile laboratories, helicopter mustering and road trains across the north enabled the plan to remove the disease but all from 2 pockets by the late 60s. By 1973, the disease was declared eradicated, and Australia could export cattle for the first time in 100 years. I don't think many exporters would think of that today. The cattle export trade is now a major source of Australian export income. Turner was awarded the OBE in 1938 and then the Gilruth Prize after it was established in 1953. When the annual ADA conference was last held in Darwin in 2009, the Veterinary History Association looked more closely at Gilruth, intending to present a more balanced story. I see now that it was but a token look. The Northern Territory's perspective is the aspect which needed intense investigation and evidence. And finally, you might think, I get to the book. Meantime, you've been entertained by the pictures. Ted starts his story in Scotland and tells you of the influence Gilruth's mother had. She was highly educated for a woman of her time and a legend then and right now to the present. In autobiographical notes, Gilruth referred to another influence, the shepherd, Jamie MacDonald, who taught him to observe and think, cross-examined and trained him as they tended sheep together. Gilruth called Jamie a researcher before his time. Does this sound like a man who could not associate with working people? I think not. Ted has delved deep into the life story and the political happenings which led to Gilruth being pushed out of Darwin by incensed inhabitants. And that's the bit that most people know. He has spent a huge amount of time and effort to give us the whole story, and this is an important book for the Northern Territory and for the veterinary profession. Ted is widely acknowledged for his storytelling ability. When I first read his second autobiographical book, Sit Down Up North, my thought was that every young person in the Territory should read that book. Recently, I reread the autobiographies, The Paper Boys War and Sit Down Up North, and enjoyed the stories all over again. Great records of the time, and they need to be in the curriculum, mark you. The storytelling extends to this intensively researched book on Gilruth, and it is an easy read. Although heavily annotated, it flows, and one is caught up with the events. Possibly I have a biased interest, but I was carried along with the happenings and found new aspects of the story. It came as a surprise to learn of the events after Gilruth's departure, and whilst Kerry was appointed as Director of the Northern Territory, and the fact that Kerry and his associates were also obliged to leave. The lack of government support, political mischief, and the Commission of Inquiry, the verbatim accounts make interesting reading. One wonders at the ineptness of the Commissioner. The omissions. Nelson was never questioned. The acceptance that a letter thieved instead of posted could be handed round without any suggestion of corruption. It is all there for you to read and makes for very interesting reading and a basis for great discussions in many times to come. In notes at the conclusion of the story, Ted states that he is a social commentator. Indeed, he is, and this is well established in earlier books. However, this is a scholarly book and will certainly be a recognised authority from people from all walks to read and reference. There is a rich inclusion of photographs, and they tell some interesting facts about the Gilruth family. They were involved, integrated in Darwin life, obviously mixed with its cosmopolitan inhabitants. Ted has had contact with the family in Scotland and Australia, and they have contributed. It is a privilege and honour to be asked to launch this great book, which I found so comprehensive and engaging. It is a book so important for Territorians and for the veterinary profession, and it is a great illustration of the importance of knowing the whole story before commenting. I commend this book to you and declare it launched. Congratulations, Ted.
I'll tell you the truth about Dr. Gilruth. I'll do the best that I can. There'll be no baloney. I'll give you only the relevant facts